This video, I think, was released like a week ago. So this is like the last video that we watched, I think, was all the way back from 2016, 2017. Okay. So like Trump was fresh. You had all this. Now we're way past that. Okay. We're in the future. And CNN. Now, of course, like you wouldn't think that CNN would be the place of intelligence. But like you've seen what Jonathan Haidt provides, okay? And so this CNN guy who does, I guess, YouTube videos for CNN was like, I'm doing a piece on political extremism. I should get Jonathan Haidt, okay? Now we'll see how it goes. And for what we're gonna have to watch a bit of this guy speaking first, uh, to set up the thing. And things are gonna be said here that I know are gonna annoy Tim in the chat probably. Uh, but we'll watch it, and yeah, well, I can't remember this guy's name either. All these bland talking heads, like for journalism stuff. But here's CNN decided to do this piece on extremism uh, a week ago. So this is fresh. This is fresh,
Ugh,
modern day content.
fresh content.
Yeah.
Yeah, you and me both, Tim. I cannot wait to be annoyed.
Hey all, I'm John Avalon, and this is
He's John
Reality
Avalon.
Check on the Extremism.
Reality check.
What makes a
I'm not
person
Chris Cuomo.
gravitate?
Yeah. Right. We should acknowledge CNN has gone through some troubled times recently.
Yeah, just going through some churn down at the news studio.
I've heard some new allegations against Don Lemon. I can't remember the context.
Ooh.
Nothing sexual, but him like I think it was helping Jesse Smollett to like downplay the charges against him or something. Although I haven't followed up on that. But either way, CNN's having a moment. So we get this piece on the psychology of extremism. Love to get a reality check from a guy named after a mythical fairy island from the Arthurian legends. Yes, Avalon.
Towards
Deep cut.
extremism.
I like that.
Is there an underlying personality type that draws people toward authoritarian leaders, regardless of whether they're on the left or the right?
already up to a great. Both are these people are the same. They're both
Yeah.
they're both extreme.
both have facial hair.
Yeah,
Lenin and Hitler.
they both
Wow.
talked to audiences. And told them to be extreme.
Wearing a
Focus.
suit and a tie.
They both
Yeah.
told teenagers to skateboard and vape.
Yeah. Oh god. CNN.
Oh my god. Just
Well, that's
the
been a
worst.
question studied by psychologists for decades. In the wake of World War II, professors at UC Berkeley wanted to understand how Germany and Italy, two long-standing civilized societies, could fall under the sway of Hitler and Mussolini so quickly. They developed a data-driven test they called the F scale, F for fascism, and used it to measure what they called authoritarian personality types. A decade or so later at Yale University, a social psychology professor named Stanley Milgram famously got students to apply what seemed to be increasingly painful electric shocks at the behest of an authority figure. Most people followed orders rather than questioning authority.
So, I don't know. Are you familiar with the Milgram experiments?
I remember hearing some audio from it a while ago, and just like random podcasts about it, but I wouldn't be able to speak to it on any sort of like familiar level.
This is particularly where I said Tim was gonna get annoyed.
Yeah.
That's pretty much how I felt when I first heard it. For one, like I will just like the last little bit he said, where like most people did not question authority. That like clearly does not capture what this study did. I mean, there's so many flaws with what Milgram did, but like putting that aside, the basics of the experiment were you had a person you had so there's the Confederate is the person who is in on what's going on, and you have like the subject. Okay, so
Right.
the subject is told that what they're going to be doing is teaching someone how to like learn words or something like this, okay? And for every error, you flick a switch on a thing that's hooked up to a battery. It'll give like a shock to to the other person you're trying to teach these words, okay? But unbeknownst to that person, the subject, the person who you're electrocuting is a Confederate. So they they're not actually hooked up to a battery. They're just an actor, okay? But so you're going through the motions, and then of course the person would make a mistake. So you start and like the buzz. I think they get people to feel the buzz first, and so when you feel it, like it'll be like a little like a static shock, right? That's like the first thing, right? But as the switches go up, it eventually gets to a point where it's just three X's. It doesn't give you the voltage, it's just X X X, okay? And so part of what the experiment is, you're in the room, you're teaching the person who's in another room, but you saw them get hooked up. You don't know that they're an actor, but they're in the other room, and you have a person behind you in like a white trench coat, who the only thing that they say to you, I think, is they say keep going. I think like that's their one prompt, something like that. So as people go, uh, as more gets wrong, they have to escalate the like degree of shock. And as it gets higher, eventually the person on the other side starts screaming, telling them to stop. Okay.
Hmm.
Now, what the experiment is supposed to set up is to see how far people will go, especially when the authority figure behind you wearing the white coat is only telling you to keep going. Right. Now, most people do question. They'll go like, uh, should I continue? Should I like, they'll get like freaked out, confused, all that kind of stuff. Oh, okay. So Tim said the wording is you have no choice. The experiment must continue. So that's all the authority figure is telling you. Okay. Now, I think now Tim, you could correct me if I'm wrong on this one too. I think what it showed was eventually like it'll eventually the person on the other side will stop making sounds. So like when you ask them the word prompt and you want them to give the correct answer, they're just not responding, which means they got it wrong and you have to keep going. Okay. All the way up to the XXX. And then it's just a matter of like, will they go all the way? Right? When this person is now not making any more noises, are they dead? No one's checking on them. Are you going to go all the way? And I think what the experiment showed was that close to 70% or just over 70, like around 70% of people went all the way to like the triple X. Not that they didn't question it, because they were questioned and distressed and worried along the way, which is why this is a completely unethical experiment that'll never happen today, right? Because the
Yeah.
people flipping
Yeah.
these switches were clearly in distress and were like, didn't necessarily want to go through it, you know? But
Sorry.
but if you want to shock kids at home in your own makeshift Milgram experiment, make sure you do it while drinking a Diet Pepsi.
Unbelievable.
Thanks, Piano, for,
No
for that
problem.
ad prop. Uh, so so the fact that like people go all that way, a lot of people like talked about like that's kind of terrifying. That like all the person had to do was say you have no choice, the experiment must continue, and people would go all the way to basically shock this person to death. You know, now and this is supposed to relate to like this could explain why say people were complacent in the Holocaust, right? These were kind of like the implications or the reasons why someone like Milgram was doing these studies was to explain how just like everyday people could participate in such an atrocious thing. And it's largely because it's the I'm just following orders kind of thing, right?
Hmm.
Now, whether or not you can actually conclude that from the work is complicated. And there's been so many several like other studies that have been done since which show that like you can moderate this experiment in many ways and it'll reduce the extent to which people go all the way. So part of the reason why like the first experiment was so weird is cuz like you're a university student in a university experiment on a university campus and you're thinking to yourself, they wouldn't actually want me to kill someone, would they? You know what I mean? It creates an artificial
Yes.
scenario. So they've done other situations where like you remove the person, like you change how the person's dressed behind you. So they're no longer wearing a lab coat, they're dressed differently. More people will drop off. Maybe you do it off campus without university students at a warehouse rather than a hospital. People Less people will go all the way, right? So there's ways to like mitigate this. And you can still say it's a little worrying that even there, some people will go all the way to shocking someone to death, you know? Uh,
Yeah.
but either way, that's sort of like what he gets at. But like the way he frames it here is just so it's so like I guess explain what I just explained to you now, and we'll listen to how he describes this again and why it like I don't know. A lot of people get that experiment wrong, but then have this guy do it in like 10 seconds.
And before we do that, just a quick reminder that there's nothing more shocking than the great taste of Diet Pepsi. Just really wanted to read that comment from Tim because it was so good.
That's a really good comment, Tim.
And for the people who are new to our show, you can use your points, channel points to redeem Pepsi ad breaks is what that was.
Yes, because we are officially sponsored by Diet Pepsi.
Officially. Oh, we're getting a Chairman Mouth thing. I'm gonna play this thing and then we'll listen to Chairman Mouth. This is how he explained it.
University, a social psychology professor named Stanley Milgram famously got students to apply what seemed to be increasingly painful electric shocks at the behest of an authority figure. Most people followed orders rather than questioning authority. In recent
Some like one of the biggest, most controversial psychological experiments
Yeah.
summed up so poorly in a CNN bit.
At the behest of an authority figure, like Hitler or Lenin.
On a university campus in an artificial scenario. And no one questioned like the idea that no one questioned it. Like you look when you watch like the old videos, like you can clearly see people looking back at the dude like, you want me to go all the fucking way? Like most people are not like the interesting thing is most people are not like complete fucking like horrible monsters. They were like, you really want me to do this? But he's like, no one questioned it. They were just like, fuck it, let's go all the way, baby. Triple X, let's kill him. Not, not quite how it worked. All right, this is our Mao quote. Whoever sides with the revolutionary people is a revolutionary. Whoever sides with imperialism, feudalism, and bureaucratic capitalism is a counter-revolutionary. Whoever sides with the revolutionary people in words only but acts otherwise is a revolutionary in speech. Whoever sides with the revolutionary people in deed as well as in word is a revolutionary in the full sense. This is closing speech at the second session of the First National Committee of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, June 23rd, 1950. That was a very tautological quote by Mao in that one.
That reminded me of a quote from the Sino-Soviet split that I need to find now.
Well,
You can play other things and I'll hunt for this, but
the funny thing is, other than the one, this is the other thing that annoys me about this bit. Other than the Lenin picture so far, noticed how like all this is reflecting on the fact that like, yes, right wing authoritarianism is a big fucking problem. Fascism, problem. But like for some reason, you had to add that Lenin picture. You know, very weird.
Well, you know, he's the guy on the other side.
Got to be balanced.
That has scary facial hair. You know,
Yeah.
same. It's that classic centrist of like, you know, on one side, it's the person on the left who is just saying like, I want people to have things,
Yeah.
and then on the other side, it's like you know, a far right Nazi being like, I want to kill that person for existing, and then the centrist is in the middle going, I can't tell these two things apart.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just it's kind of depressing.
Well, that's the thing. Like,
found
I
a
don't want.
quote.
I just before you get to that, like, I don't want to be confused and like, again, it's you don't even have to like endorse Lenin or endorse like or like reading of Mao. It's more of like these things are different, and like the faults that you can point to a Lenin or Mao are different than the faults that you're gonna point to in a fucking Hitler or Mussolini. Like they're different
Mm-hmm.
issues. Like to even to and like I'm clearly more sympathetic to one side of this, of course, right? But like the idea that somehow like oh, we could just lump them under one umbrella. They're authoritarian fascisty stuff, you know?
Yeah, the mean guys. Um, it's so reductive, right?
Yeah. Viano, you were gonna give the message.
Okay, yeah. So this was at the time of the Sino-Soviet split when the Chinese communists declared Khrushchev a revisionist and said that he was like straying from the correct path. And so Khrushchev says the difference between the Soviet Union and China is that I rose to power from the peasant class, whereas you came from the privileged Mandarin class. And then Zhao responded saying, true, but there is this similarity. Each of us is a traitor to his class. And it's so fucking good. Like,
Your camera has gone.
yeah.
I don't even know what's happening.
Well, we fixed the audio issue, so it had to be something. Um,
You look. It's
I
kind
am
of
not
majestic.
gonna attempt to fix it. Yeah.
Screw centrism,
Yeah.
indeed. And we're definitely going to be screwing centrism at the end of this video.
In years, we've seen a rise in authoritarian leaders around the world, pushing back on what had seemed to be a rising tide of liberal democracy after the fall of the Berlin Wall. Extremist beliefs
After
and
the fall of the
conspiracy
Berlin Wall.
theories, as well as intolerance of the opposition, have become increasingly mainstreamed here in the United States. Get this, a 2019 study found that roughly 42% of both
Check this
parties
I love this. 42% of both parties.
view the opposition as downright evil. A CNN
Now, put context to that. 42% of both sides think that the other is evil. Isn't the more interesting question there? Is one of them right? or 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 they or do we just have to treat this neutrally? What an interesting fact we've stumbled upon. They both hate each other. Like the interesting question to me is like, yeah, but like, oh, the other one is racist and wants to kill people? Maybe one of these things is worse than what the other thing is. But no.
Well, let's not get bogged down in the details, really. We need to know that this stat exists, and let's move on to compare Lenin to people that
Like,
are not like him.
but this is like the thing that's weird is like this like centrist take is just like any like these polar oppositions that are creating. That's the problem. And it gets back to even to like the last video we watched where it's like this notion that somehow it's the kids. The kids are causing us to react, you know? Like it's somehow the left's fault for this reaction on the right. So really the left needs to move more to the center so we have this like fun balancing thing or like whatever they fucking envision happening. And it's like or maybe the left is reacting to the fact that like you centrist person are becoming just as fucking racist as like the assholes out there in allowing them to exist and continue spreading their hatred.
You know, like centrist and I hate using this word, but objective journalists love to point at polarization as something that's because of or due to the far right and far left elements, but they never like take responsibility for feeling like both voices need to be heard equally. Like the ideas are of equal value when one side is literally just Trump supporters and the other are people that are advocating for Medicare for all and
Don't want to
and
be shot by
housing
police.
and don't want to be killed by police for existing childcare, just ways of making life a little bit easier for folks that have had a rough go of it, right?
Dude.
It's just they don't take any responsibility for their role in that.
I think it was CNN. Like, they do like the puff piece of like Joe from Louisiana is just a normal dude who also happens to be a neo-Nazi. Let's see how he like reacts to his family and takes his kids to school. And, like those fucking like pieces. I would love them to do like a story like Thomas is an anti-fascist and hangs out at the local pub or like just fucking it's always the puff pieces like you're right in which they play this balance thing. And yet the puff pieces always seemed a little slanted. Like The issue that we're having is we don't understand the right enough. We need to understand the right and get how, like, we have to figure out what they're doing. But like, why isn't there this movement of like, like with what Jonathan Haidt did in the last segment too? It's like, why wasn't there a moment where he's like, maybe we need to understand the left more. I like and just get to know them and figure out why are they mad at professors. Maybe we should figure out what they feel. But it's like, have those people who were yelling at us ever wondered what it's like to be a racist? There needs to be, honestly. Like, it's ridiculous. He's gonna tell it to us straight here.
Then poll from September found that 78% of Republicans believe that Biden did not win in 2020, while 54%, a majority, believe there's solid evidence of this, despite the fact that no such evidence exists.
Yeah.
Even more concerning, a PRRI poll from November of 2021 found that 30% of Republicans and 11% of Democrats believe that, quote, true American patriots may have to resort to violence in order to save our country.
Now again, the way those numbers are skewed, okay, yeah, 30% of Republicans, much higher than 11% of Democrats, sure. Okay. That being said, again, it would be one thing if you're like, we need to resort to violence because there's these fucking people who stormed the Capitol with a bunch of guns, and hey, maybe they're not going to give up quietly. We might have to violently do something. That would be one thing. But apparently, that is just as bad as those people who took the guns to the fucking Capitol. But it's like, I don't know. Is it? I could argue that one of these things is better than the other.
I want to see the percentage of Americans that believe that they may have to resort to violence in order to destroy the country, because that is much more important.
And if you mean by riots the Black Lives Matter rallies, Black Lives Matter rallies, those were base. They were not worse. They were totally cool and awesome. So, Aeon X10, if you disagree, expose yourself and we can get rid of you. But yes, more maybe this number on the Democratic side needs to be higher. Maybe that is like the correct way of oh, I do disagree. But it's cool. Okay, well, as long as you can disagree, just don't say anything explicitly fascist or we will ban you. That's how it works. This is a pro burning precinct stream. Correct.
In order to save our country. This is apocalyptic stuff, and it's totally inconsistent with our best traditions. So why is it taking hold now? I want to look beyond Donald Trump and the feedback loop of partisan politics to see what modern studies are saying about the underlying psychology of extremism. For example, a recent study out of Cambridge University found that mental rigidity is tied to intense political partisanship on the left and right.
So notice, this is the thing that blows my mind. That whole front-loaded piece that we just watched primarily focused on the right-wing extremism, did it not? It seemed like the people who were the bad actors doing the most damage clearly held the weirdest views, like the 54% of Republicans think there's solid evidence the election was stolen. Maybe there's a concern, and the concern is not the left. And yet they still have to say the problem is mental rigidity, and it happens on both sides. It's both sides.
They're just calling balls and strikes, you know? They're just they're so worried that people that hate their guts will hate their guts for telling the truth, right? Like, it's so infuriating to to balance the 11% of people who are affiliated with the Democratic Party. Not like, I don't think the Democratic Party is really a left-wing party. Is just, the alternative to the Republican Party in the United States. But you have 11% of people saying, true patriots may have to resort to violence to do things. And then then you have a much larger percentage saying that on the Republican side. But there was also actions taken in the form of I mean, the word insurrection doesn't really work for that, but the January 6th event at the Capitol was special. It was a special moment,
Yeah.
and we should all be very concerned that it happened.
I mean, there is an element in which, like, I don't. There are some people on the left that want to downplay it to a certain extent, and frankly, it's like, yes, I do not think that the Democrats are going to usher in my utopia, but I also don't want a coup d'état in which a right-wing Christo-fascist movement gains power. Like, why is that not fucking hard to understand? And they like to pretend like,
Yeah.
oh, don't worry about it, everything's fine. Two things that just happened today or within like this week was one, the Steve Bannon thing. He got in front of a Trump judge, and now his ability to be like questioned by Congress has been pushed out to July. Which is like, at what use is that going to be when the election is right around the fucking corner? You know? So they've basically essentially said Congress is a fucking useless institution. Like a Trump judge did that. And it's like that is a meaningful result. Then you have the fact that it turns out that the military that spoke to Congress lied, and that like General Flynn, like QAnon Flynn's brother, who was still a general and with the American military, and who was the reason why the military didn't get called on January 6th. Apparently, he lied to Congress. That has come out recently, like as if he was trying to cover up something that he said, but we don't know what that is yet. But he lied to Congress about it. Like maybe, like it's amazing because like that suggests that there was like things in motion that maybe some people in the military were on board with on January 6th. And I don't know, maybe that's fucking concerning. Maybe we should take that as a serious fucking threat and not just go like, oh, liberals are just gonna care about things, or I don't know why leftists won't be outraged about this, you know?
No, it's a very serious situation. I do not want to downplay it at all. And that's not what my intention was. I hope that wasn't directed at me, because I
No,
think
no,
you
no.
were
Like you were
100%
agreeing
right.
with me.
Yeah.
It was more of like,
Yeah.
I was riffing.
Yeah.
Riffing off.
Okay.
Yeah.
100%.
And like the closeted fascist in our chat right now is saying that January 6th didn't require the military. That's not the issue. The issue is the machinations behind the scene of like, should we use the military in a particular way to secure certain things, or like in favor of Trump? Like it's those things when the military is going out, like, because it's one thing to say they're not required, but if they specifically like sidestep like orders and issues and calls for help in order to favor one, like a president, that's like where you get into like the not democratic side of things, you know, things we should be concerned about. And that's regardless of whether or not they actually were required, because frankly, they weren't required, you know.
Yeah.
That's not the point.
Another study
But we're
out of the
mentally
Netherlands
rigid.
broke
Everyone's
down the
mentally rigid.
common characteristics
Right.
in the psychological features of people who gravitate towards extreme ideologies on the right and the left. They found 4 broad underlying psychological features: a sense of distress about society, an overly simplistic black or white perception of the world, a consequent overconfidence in their own judgments and beliefs, which translates to an intolerance for different groups based on those prejudicial assumptions. For example, they found that social they found that
I just wanted to
based on those prejudicial assumptions.
I mean, like, they're going to say this, it like occurs to both sides, and there might be some of that, but like, again, a less tolerance to different groups. I want you to keep in mind, because like, when you frame that, the question is like, what are these groups? Like, it would be one thing if I'm less tolerant towards racists as a group,
Mhm.
and it would be another thing if you're less tolerant toward races as a group. You know, these are two different things. One is good, one is bad, you know.
Yeah, different groups is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence, right? Like, and I feel like context is key. Like, I agree. I feel like we should be intolerant to people who are intolerant. right? Like that's fair. I'm okay with that.
Chippy's in the chat, by the way. Chippy's.
Oh,
Chippy's.
God bless Chippy.
Uh,
That's
who,
like one of the greatest on-stream moments.
yeah. Who gets to decide what is good and bad? I'll tell you. Me. I get to decide.
That's what the stream is for.
Yeah. I'll tell
Jonathan
you.
Haidt, bad.
I mean, that's like, no one. It's not a matter of deciding. It's a matter of like, I don't know. I worked through an ethical framework, and my conclusion was fascism is bad, racism bad. Other people want to agree with me, cool. They're my friends. If you don't agree with me, you're not my friend. Problem solved.
Wild.
For example, they found that social categories subject to right-wing prejudice include ethnic minorities, gays and lesbians, and feminists.
What the hell just happened?
While social categories subject to left-wing prejudice include Christians, business people, and the military.
The military and business people are two of the most oppressed classes, I would say.
Wow.
Will someone please think of the business people? The most oppressed minority.
They're just gonna have that graphic up too. They're like, no, this is good. This is good.
I know.
Great
No,
work.
they never fucking. Wait, like at no point was fucking Avalon here going, wait a second. these
Wait, is this
two
dumb as
lists,
fuck?
these two lists look really different. Oh my
I'm
god.
taking a screenshot of that. That's fucking beautiful.
Oh my god.
Yeah. Have we considered that both sides might be bad? I mean, being prejudicial against gays and lesbians is one thing. Business people? Some of those business people are gays and lesbians.
Yeah, while being the backbone of this blessed economy. It's-
Holy
Fuck.
shit. I'm so CNN. Thank you.
For both the left and right, they say, such prejudice is attributable to an ideological conflict that's based on the assumption that people with a different social identity also have different ideological beliefs. In other words, people with politically extreme beliefs tend to downgrade the humanity and individuality of people with whom they perceive they'll disagree.
Yes, I mean, sure, I downplay the humanity of racists. But tell me that's a
But
wrong
also,
thing.
like he's got like he's got a picture of two brains. Like, oh, these people have bad brains because they think differently than me, the enlightened centrist, right? Like, it's like who's really downplaying the humanity of a different group here?
No, John Avalon's sitting there going, like, I don't devalue the humanity of anyone. That's why I'm asking Hitler over for dinner for a casual cat. He's
Well-
and I do not devalue his humanity, so he can come over for tea and crumpets.
But to be fair, he's also inviting Lenin. So who can say if he's making a bad decision or not?
Yes, and they will engage in civil discourse in the marketplace of ideas, and it will be wonderful, and it will not be insufferable at all.
And in 4 years, they can vote on.
Oh my god.
This is the essence of prejudice and illiberalism, and it can lead to some very dangerous things. Here to discuss the underlying psychology of extremism is author and NYU social psychology professor Jonathan Haidt. He'll explain why the underlying environment of extremism
Oh God,
is
the
making us all
TikTok.
stupid.
Oh no.
And why it's making us all stupid. That apparently is like, I did not, part of me is like, I didn't think that that was like the direction this was heading, but apparently the direction this is heading is the ideological extremism is in fact making us all stupid. Didn't you know? What would be the punishment for racism in your dictatorship? I mean, for one, I wouldn't have a dictatorship, but if I got to have a dictatorship, probably execution. I'm the dictator. What do you want from me? I'll go full. No, but like, you know, we'll figure it. Like in a perfect society, what can you do? Like I don't know, some form of rehabilitation. Figure it out. I don't have the answer. Yeah,
Re-education. Just regular education. We don't even have to read about it,
but like in my
Like,
world,
Hell yeah.
you as a racist, the one thing you will be excluded from is having a platform to spew your racism to other people. We will at least prevent you to have that. But I also believe in punishment, in the sense that like I don't think prison should be for punishment. So we'll just like if you're gonna be a racist, go over here and like have your video games and chill out. You just don't get to yell at other people and be a racist. I think
well,
that's a good
see,
fucking deal.
and that's the difference between us is that like for me, communications technology doesn't exist in my dictatorship.
Right.
Well, you're gonna find out.
So
Neither
it's
does
really
it in
like
communications technology doesn't even exist in Hates. So you're gonna. We're- so this is Vienno is Jonathan Haidt confirmed.
yeah, that's the confirmation of the night. See, in my
Wild.
society, everybody just like surrounds you, goes, shh, shut up, you don't have to say it, shh, shh, shh. And then like eventually that person's gonna break and they're not gonna do it anymore because they know that they'll have to sit through that again.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's nice.
And it's a learning experience as well, right? It's calming too. Being shushed is nice.
Yeah, I agree.
Sounds
Yours
like
yours
water.
does sound nice.
Yeah. I would take away their ham radio
Yeah.
personally.
Yes.
You get like a ham. What you do is you get like vouchers for a certain amount of time on ham radio, and like the more racist you are, you take the vouchers away. No more time
Yeah.
reduced.
Yeah. Eventually
just-
you're taking out transistors and sprockets right out of the radio. And he's like, you get this back when you learn how to be decent.
They can't apply for renewal for their hand crank when it breaks.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Oh,
Beautiful society.
yeah.
I like it.
Ideal, you know?
Yeah.
What could go wrong?
Utopian.
That's when you come.
Oh, here we go. And we know Jonathan Haidt already.
John
so we
Haidt,
know how
it's
this is
great
gonna
to
go.
see you. I want to start
Oh
with
boy,
this.
eyebrows.
What psychological traits do you think make people gravitate towards extremism and groupthink?
So there are a variety of traits that we've long known go with authoritarianism. Need for closure, they don't like things being open or ambiguous. But the most interesting change in how we think about this now is that we realize it's not just a trait that people will show in every context. Karen Stenner, a political scientist in Australia, found that people who are prone to authoritarianism, if you reassure them and you say, you know what, Americans are actually coming together, our values are coming together, suddenly they're not particularly racist or homophobic or anything else. But if you give them one thing that suggests we're coming apart, we're losing our coherence, suddenly then it's like you press a button on their forehead, they get very defensive, and they start wanting to kick out deviants. They become racist, prejudiced against all sorts of groups. So it's not just a fixed trait, it's actually a dynamic which some have now called securitarianism. When people feel a sense of threat, they suddenly get very rigid and
So
punitive.
you're saying this is almost
So I don't know. Like Tim, are you saying need for closure because you agree with need for closure? Because I was gonna say like I don't think anything he said here is too objectionable, and I think like I mean I mentioned John Jost earlier, who is a person who criticized Jonathan Haidt, but his version of this was like it was like social threat theory, and what was it? Oh, I can't remember the self-justifying orientation or something. I can't remember the exact name for it. SJO or something like this. And the idea is that when you have threats, you you like lump in like with your group and become very protective at like these antagonistic like outgroups, and that often happens with like uh if you measure like conservatism after like an extreme event. So for example, after September 11th, you look at like population levels of conservatism. So you can look at just like polls. Like George Bush's numbers shot through the fucking roof after September 11th. I think it was like 80% approval rating, which is like almost impossible for like any president. Immediately following September 11th. But like even if you were to study people, they would like report like very conservative position on like studies and shit like this. To show that once you feel this threat, a lot of people revert to being very conservative. So I don't know if there's anything too objectionable with what he said here yet.
Give it time.
Yes, there's always time.
Almost like a fight or flight mechanism for society, that when perceived change is too fast, people retrench and lash out.
That's right. Exactly.
No. I mean, when perceived change is happening too fast, I don't even know what the fuck that means. But I guess like, what is it like? All of a sudden, or you, like all of a sudden you have to pronoun trans people appropriately, and then like they're like, "That's too fast." Like that's not.
This is not a thing that can be done incrementally. Acknowledging the humanity of other people is not a thing like, what, we can do it in 3 weeks. It's like, no, do it now. Like, it's not.
I mean, but even
Sorry.
like, even if that was the case that they react that way, the question is like, then we have to find some way to do it easily or slowly. Like, that's not how to like acknowledge that. Acknowledge that in any way, you know? It's like, no, like maybe the problem is like we have to deal with the fact that people are freaking out, right? But it's like weird for him to go from like the larger effect of like the need for protection against an outsider that's attacking you, like people perceived what was happening on September 11th as like a very real threat and then became super conservative. But that's a lot different than just saying like changes to society that go too fast. So, because like again, like gay marriage became legal, and it's not like the population went like conservative. Like that's not quite how this works, you know.
I also want to bring up the fact that his hair and his eyebrows are so drastically different colors that that's all I could focus on in the last little bit.
That is fair.
It is striking.
Tim said, need for closure is a good one if you want to track individual differences in this. But Haidt is really simplifying the complex field of coalitional psychology. But yeah, broadly, people increase their group commitments in solidarity and policing at the perception of outside threats. But there are some nuances to that. Yeah. And then he goes, here he's real wrong. They're just framing conservative discomforts as the ubiquitous social norm. Yeah, yeah. Rather than acknowledging that any given people have a range of comforts and discomforts relative to the status quo, anyone who experiences change to a part of society that was previously very bad for them, surprisingly, they think that's good. It's inherently centering society around the subset of people currently best served by the status quo. Yeah, exactly. Yup.
Exactly. You can
Exactly.
think of it as
Even Haidt agrees.
as a kind of an emergency response button, but it's not selfish. And here's the key thing: it's not that you're trying to protect yourself; it's that you're trying to protect the group. Some people are threatened by rapid change, and we think of these as sort of traditional social conservatives. They say, "Okay, we need change, but not so fast."
You know, we when we want to purge gay and trans people from our in group, it's only because we care about the in group so much, you know?
Yeah,
It's fair.
yeah. Oh, and we want the change, just not now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Change
and we
it
don't want to
later.
set date on it either.
Yeah.
We don't. Let's not put a time frame on this. We don't need a due date.
I
Let's
mean,
just kick the can.
I want my in group to be strong, but like slowly and over a long period of time. And after I've already excluded most of you. Come on.
Yeah, like a long period of time, like thousands of years, perhaps. Yeah, it's just nonsense, right? Like he wants to kick the can down the road so he can live in the world that he thinks exists.
Yeah. Tim said a reminder, Haidt is a big fan of group multi-level selection. And this is something I didn't want to get into because it's a little technical, but in the third part of his Righteous Mind book, because I talked about the first two parts, the third and last part of it, uh, he goes on a long sort of like justification for his theory based on this thing called group selection for evolution, which is not widely adopted by the field of evolutionary biology. uh, so it's like interesting that his whole like theory is like based on something that like most people in that field that he's not even a part of, but wanted to like dip his toes in it, all think he's wrong about it. Uh, it is contentious to say the least. Yeah, exactly. Uh, I think it's largely incoherent. I've listened to a lot of group selection theorists, and I'm just like, I don't even know what they're talking about. And so I've tried my best. But that being said, so like, I don't know. I guess something in there was related to his model of group selection theory, which, again, not widely adopted by the broader evolutionary community in biology. Food for thought. His beacon of intellectual rigor went out on a limb on a particular theory that no one agrees with. I wouldn't say no one, maybe like 2 or 3 people in academia.
Yeah, a couple of weirdos.
Yes.
Some people are threatened more by diversity and us coming apart. Those are the people who tend to gravitate, especially to right-wing authoritarianism.
Now, I want to say, you're a self-described centrist and liberal, but you've been very concerned about the rise of illiberal ideas on the left, saying that you see this as creating a mirror image of conservative populism on the right. Explain.
What the framing of this question is so weird because it's like, again, through most of what we've just witnessed in most of this video, all we've gotten is like the right wing are insurrectionists, don't believe that elections took place that really did take place. They're violent. But then the question is, but you, sir, I got you on because you have a critique of the left, and I feel like it'll really balance out my report if I get you, Jonathan Haidt, you centrist, anti-left person. Come on here, give me something. Give me something here. We gotta go.
Yes. So first, let me just say I'm a liberal not because I'm on the left. I'm not on the left anymore. I'm a liberal because I believe that the only solution to living together with diversity that has ever been found that works is the liberal tradition in which we try to grant each other maximum freedom to live together and create lives that we want to live. Now, traditionally, as we were just saying, we found that, these rigid people, these people threatened by diversity, they're all on the right. That's the problem, right-wing authoritarianism. And that is pretty visible. And
I mean, this is pretty visible. It's a very visible representation of the right wing being very rigid in the racism. 100%, Jonathan Haidt. Now
Yeah. I do love the fact that he's like, I'm a liberal. I'm not on the left. It's like, we know.
Yeah.
We all knew that. You didn't have to explain that to us.
I think he feels that everyone thinks that like academics are like left, or maybe he's trying to get over the idea that like the America, the word liberal means a lot different than like other areas. So maybe there's some of that in there. If I were to try to be generous to him there.
Yeah.
I love
That's totally fair.
Tim says, I love that Haidt describes humans as 90% chimp, 10% bee. And I'm like, yes, bees, which famously evolved via group selection and not an extremely well understood version of selfish gene dynamics based on the heritability asymmetries of sex determination in that species. No, but they're in a group, so it clearly had nothing to do with genes.
Oh, right.
Part of, like, this is like the group selection thing is just incoherent because they're like select. So the disagreement, since Tim brought it up, is between like evolution, which standardly people think of it as like working at the level of the gene, that what gets passed on and replicates is our genetic material. And then group selections come out of nowhere and go, yeah, but what if the group is the unit of selection? And then I'm like, do groups have sex and pass on genetic material? Or do the individuals within that group have sex and pass on material? And they'll go, yeah, but think about the group, though. Like bees are like groupie, and I'm just like, I don't know what we're talking about. And Jonathan Haidt is on the side of it's the group thing. The group thing's important, and I don't know what he's saying.
It's probably something about participation awards, if anything, from the last the last video we watched
I think like
has something to do with it.
I think Tim might be connecting it to the fact that like he's talking about like how like traditionally group cohesiveness is like a good thing, and that somehow maybe like in the Petersonian sense too, like somehow we evolved to be very group and to be insular like this. So like it's actually a good thing that what conservatives are doing because like we evolved to be like this. Like I feel like that might be part of his argument here.
Yeah, yeah. I think he'd probably see value in sticking with something that already exists, right? Like he said that the best way of existing, or for the country to exist, is in the whatever liberal utopia he thinks
Yes.
is current used to exist, right?
Right, where we all
Now,
just sit around, discuss ideas, and don't get mad at each other.
yes, which definitely always happens.
Yeah.
That is what happened. Everybody was on board for the Vietnam War. Every, everybody loved it.
Yeah.
Ugh.
That's like yeah, and this is just an aberration.
Especially
Only
in the
time in
last
history
5
people disagreed.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
or 7 years, we're seeing a rise of right-wing populism that has authoritarian elements around the world. But here's another interesting twist in recent social psychological research.
you consider?
People have been looking for left-wing authoritarianism for a long time. Some have called it the Loch Ness monster of political psychology.
So just a pause there before he goes on to speak. He just talked about like left-wing authoritarianism is the Loch Ness monster of like this research, which means like, it's this creature that you've been searching for, but you just can't find it. And my suggestion is maybe it doesn't really exist. If it's so fucking hard to find, maybe it just isn't there. That is my guess. Now, I'm more familiar with the work of Bob Altemeyer, who is someone who I think nails a lot of this a lot more. Like, if you were to get an expert on extremism in terms of political ideology, I would go to Bob Altemeyer. He's retired, doesn't talk as much. He might be dead at this point. I don't know. He's pretty old. But I think he's from Manitoba as well. So cool Canadian boy, Bob Altemeyer. The thing, it's not. He argues that like even in movements that uh, happened, for example, in the Soviet Union, which seemingly adopt a kind of like authoritarianism in certain instances, can result less from like uh, less in like it's seemingly left wing because you're thinking that you know the dictators of the Soviet are quote unquote left, right? So it's seemingly left, but usually the individual impulse towards authoritarianism in those things tend to rely on like conservative justifications of like, well, yes, we must trust a dear leader Stalin, for example. I'm just like using this as a framing technique. Yes, we must trust Stalin because he took over from the other people, and we must trust the tradition of the Workers' Party going forward, et cetera, right? Like it relies on a kind of like right wing justification for that kind of like authoritarian people to latch onto because it's like now the like authoritarian structures is no longer liberal democracy or like corporations and capitalism, which lead people authoritarians to like right wing people, but like it's manifesting itself differently in left wing systems. But that doesn't necessarily mean that like the underlying motivations are like they're kind of the same. I guess is what I mean. Now I don't know how much that holds up, but like that is the extent to which left wing authoritarianism exists, according according to Bob Altemeyer. I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think honestly, like in that quick explainer, I feel like you did a lot more work than our boy Jonathan Haidt.
For my honors thesis.
Oh, was that what your honors thesis is about?
Yeah, that was well. I mean, I read all this for my honors thesis. It was like looking at like how to like the quick overview of what my honors thesis was to come up with a therapy that would make people less conservative. uh, Now, for various reasons, I did not get the results I wanted. In fact, I got 0 results because I failed randomization, which means by the luck of the draw, all the conservatives went in one condition and all the left or liberal people went in the other condition. And that's not good. You want a random assortment of both people in each group. And so I, by the time I was done my experiment, I could just be like, I can conclude nothing. And then I went to get a degree in philosophy instead.
That's fair. You know what? I feel for you because randomization, etc. I did not have to deal with that in my undergrad, so I feel for you deeply there.
Yes. Sorry, but
See,
yes, I did study this. That was sort of
Jody wanted to never have to like come to a definitive conclusion again, which is why he went into philosophy.
That's right. I learned that definitive conclusions were not coming, or were hard to come by. And I was like, fuck it. Let's get a little bit more
Exactly.
abstract with this shit. All right. We're nearing 12 o'clock, so we got just a couple minutes left. Let's fucking plow through it. Jonathan Haidt, here we
Let's
go.
go.
But in recent years, it's become a lot more visible. The left has been getting more authoritarian. There's interesting research showing that in 2015, there was what we now call the Great Awakening. Something happened to white people on the left. They become much more strident. They moved much further to the left, and they became in some ways much more illiberal, more focused on telling people, here's what you can't say, here's what you must say. So it's a really interesting time to be studying political psychology, and it's changing fast.
It is not an invasion of your rights, your individual rights, to be told to not be racist. It's not, no matter how bad you want it, Jonathan. Like, no.
This Loch Ness monster was hidden for us for so long, but all of a sudden in 2013 there was the Great Awakening, when all of a sudden other people went, "Hey, don't be racist," and then we saw Loch Ness monster for the first time.
And that's authoritarian, I guess, because because ... scene missing.
Because they're telling you not to do something. They have no power. They're just going, don't be a dick. But then that's authoritarian. A true non-authoritarian would be like, I don't like that you're being a dick to me, but I will respect your being a dick to me.
Yeah, please continue being an asshole to me and people that I care about.
Oh, that's the only way to not be Hitler in this scenario.
Well, if that's the alternative, I mean, we just gotta let people be horrible to people that we care about, right?
Oh my god. I love it. What a great time to be a scientist, a social scientist today, because we're just discovering this Loch Ness monster after the Great Awakening. I can't. What a non-answer to this fucking question.
The Dutch study found that political extremes believe conspiracy theories more strongly than moderates. So, can moderation, which let's define as a certain moral humility that applies equal standards to individuals from different groups, can that be taught?
You know, your politics is partly heritable, but a bigger factor, I believe, is activating the team dynamic, group versus group. When you're on a team, it makes you stupid because your thinking is how can we win, not what's true. And this is a very general principle. If you embrace
smile.
a good evil
It's
framework,
so blank.
and you see life as a
I'm so sorry. Look at his goofy face. Oh, sorry. This is very mean.
No, it is.
No thoughts, just vibes.
I almost feel like he's laughing at how ridiculous what he is saying too. Like there's an element. I realize it's probably not that. You're probably right. But the other part of me is what he's saying is so ridiculous that is the appropriate reaction to it, you know?
I also just want to like narrow in on when he was like, well, your politics are probably heritable. but and then just like nothing else was said of that, you know? Like
Yeah,
It kind of cut weird too. Like it looked like it was a jump cut there.
like he was
I don't
going to
know if
go
you
on a
guys.
long discussion, and then they're like, "We can't have that in our 10-minute YouTube clip." Cut.
Yeah, it got like a little bit like uh problematic for television, possibly. I don't know. Like it looked like there was content there, and there is no longer, because it switched to a 2-shot of them side by side right afterwards.
It Now what he's saying here also contradicts his like main contribution to the psychological literature, which is that like left-wing people, they value truth. So all of a sudden you put them in a group with other left-wing people and they're like, "Bah, truth." Like, why would that happen? Why would that happen? I don't. I mean, I get it. He's just he's Jonathan Haidt, you know. That's but somehow people are like, this guy's really smart. But like even like outside of what I just said and how this contradicts his work, when you're in a team, do you? I never have the moment where I'm like, you know what? I'm in this for the team. I no longer care about what's right or true. I'm just a part of the team now. I
I no longer have principles because I need to win. Because
It's not even
Jonathan
about
death
Haidt
to the
said so.
opposition.
you're just like math, numbers. We're
I
not
don't need
here.
'em.
We're not here about truth. We're about winning, baby.
I'm on a team now. We got matching socks.
Goodbye, truths. How are we even communicating right now? Words, am I right? Let's just team it up.
Yeah, no longer need my ham radio because I
Yeah.
am on a team. Yeah, it just like
Does a ham
it's such
radio
a
even work
juvenile
once
idea.
you're in a team? Because truth is just
No.
gone. We're in the postmodern era.
Exactly. No such thing as truth. There's team, and there's the big win.
Yeah.
That's all we care about.
The ham radios have two frequencies. One that is my team, the other is the enemy. And you never switch to the enemy because then you become them.
Oh, that's fair. It's better to destroy your radio at that point.
Oh my god. What? I think I think the better like indication of something being wrong with our society is that people are like, you know what, this Jonathan Haidt guy has a lot to offer. that is that is more an indication of our moral rot as a society, I think.
I think that's entirely fair.
Battle between we're the good people, they're the evil people, that's going to drop you by 10 or 20 points on your IQ. And so I would say
What?
that as our culture is,
I know, he just brings up IQ. It's so fucking whiplash. It's just like, let's pull out the IQ. Being on a team, you no longer care about trust, and you've knocked 20 points off your IQ.
when you're on
Oh
a
my
team,
God.
it makes you stupid because your thinking is how can we win? How can we win? Not what's true. And this is a very general principle. If you embrace a good evil framework and you see life as a battle between we're the good people, they're the evil people, that's going to drop you by 10 or 20 points on your IQ. And so I
He's
would
just
say that
doing
as
this
our
smile
culture
this
is
whole
heated up,
time.
we're getting
Like, there's been nothing else. Okay, now he's nodding. Just like
What do you...
the unending grin.
Having a great time.
It would be better if I knew John Avalon was like in on this, and just like, let's let this asshole fucking talk. But I know it's likely the scenario of just empty thoughts. Must smile for camera because that is my sole responsibility here as newsman.
Listen, I am a blank smiler. I do that all the time, and I constantly catch myself doing it, and it's very embarrassing. However, I've never done that. Whatever
John
our
Avalon-
boy just did, my face has never done that.
Tim points out that social psychologist Alex Haslam actually has an entire book unpacking specifically how false this corruption by groups framing is. So, interesting.
you by 10 or 20 points on your IQ. And so I would say that as our culture is heated up,
Get
we're
that
getting
sign.
structurally stupid. We're getting stupider and stupider. And I think a lot of people are laughing at us. I think the Chinese government's probably pretty happy about what social media is doing to our.
Again, like those were all right wing examples. Like the only thing maybe is like you have a Black Lives Matter rally person pushing away this person who's obviously lunging towards them.
He's trying to take his sign that that says something simple like Black Lives Matter, and he wants to tear it up.
Yeah, it says there is a reason nobody says fuck the fire department.
Ugh. What?
Culture is heated
See,
up.
but what we don't know is that that man's house was burnt down by the firefighters in order to
True.
make more fires to keep them in their jobs. So really, we can't say who is correct in this situation.
It is.
Well,
The fire industrial complex has gone too far.
Exactly.
well put, like I was too prejudicial here. I
Yeah.
assumed that this man was just a belligerent actor in this, but he could be defending himself against the violence of the fire department. You're right.
Oh my god.
Oh,
That's so good.
We're getting structurally stupid. We're getting stupider and stupider. And I think
feel like he's
a
talking
lot of
about
people are laughing at us. I think the
Yeah,
Chinese
it's
government's probably pretty
projection.
happy about what social media is doing to our democracy and our intelligence.
To that end,
China.
I
like,
wonder
yeah, I love like he's feeding this like China boogeyman shit too. China's just laughing at us because we can't get over the fact that we're belligerently racist.
Avalon hits a turn on this as well. That is unbelievable. I only caught the first second of it, but he's like, yes.
Yeah.
He just swings into another dumb question.
Let's make this super interesting.
To that end, I wonder what you make of this blurring of our political and personal lives and how we can start restoring a psychologically healthy balance individually and as society.
Balance.
Yeah, this is extremely alarming to me. And I would say sometimes I'm in panic mode about the future of our democracy. And it's for exactly this reason. So traditionally, until the last few years, there were different domains of life. And politicians had their norms and ways of fighting, and lawyers had their ways of norms and talking, and doctors, and there were professional
Classes of
ethics in all
people.
these different domains. And politicians could fight it out in one place, but then they could go out to dinner together, have a drink. And what we've seen in the last 5 or 7 years, I think because social media has basically knocked down the walls of everything is the public square. What we're seeing is if someone sees a politician in a restaurant and they don't like that politician, they think it's appropriate to try to shame him or her. For example, like Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who was part of the Trump administration, dining at a restaurant in Virginia, and the owner of the restaurant publicly asks her to leave. This is a major, major step backwards in the development of a liberal society.
Out of this again, this segment was posted on YouTube a week ago. It's fresh. And for an example of how like social media is bleeding out to the rest of the world is, oh no, people several years ago before there was a global pandemic got mad at Sarah Huckabee Sanders and yelled at her while she was eating at a restaurant. What has happened to our society?
If you are an elected official or you work for the government in a PR role and you help justify some of the very shitty things that they do, it's my right to yell at you.
But that's impolite.
Right, sorry. Sorry. I forgot about that. And I feel like this is a thing that is more evident north of the border. Like I think here it's like, yeah, that person's advocating for some awful, inhumane things, but they speak nicely and they don't swear and they're polite, and you have to be polite back to them, even though they don't think that you're a human being. It's ridiculous.
It's interesting because that is kind of like the more mainstream way of looking at it, but also like, can you imagine if any of the disruptions that have happened to Trudeau happened to Biden? Like, can you imagine if like the multiple, just like with clean drinking water things, with like indigenous issues that have like that people have confronted Trudeau with at liberal like fundraising events and just like out on the street and out at like any kind of speaking event versus like if somebody went up to Biden and was like, "Hey, what the fuck, dude?" Like,
Yeah.
the kind of like reactions that gets in Canada is just kind of a like, "Oh yeah, somebody did this," and like we'll clip it and we'll like play it triumphantly when Trudeau does something dumb, as if like it means anything. Whereas in America, I think the country would just have a total meltdown. Like,
I think that's fair. Yeah, I didn't really think about it in that way, but like, yeah, if Biden ever got, publicly publicly owned, like that girl who did the selfie with Trudeau, and then asked him a tough question, and he tried to like duck out of the selfie. Ugh,
right? Like,
ugh,
but it is
so good.
also like we do have a lot more of that politeness sort of framing around a lot of stuff too. So it's very like weird that we have both of those things.
You had some weird dynamics around this when it happened, like in 2016, where you had people showing up to like Trump rallies and stuff like that. Like that did occur, where like people were showing up at the Trump rallies and would stand up and yell at him, and then like some of the audience members would hit them, and there'd be a thing, and then you had like talking heads on these fucking things being like, "Well, like I understand that hitting the people who are doing that is bad, but like, why are they doing this in the first place? Like, doesn't Trump have a right to speak?" Like, it's just annoying fucking nonsense.
Yeah, let's talk about the real victim, Donald
Yeah,
Trump.
I think the reason why I wanted to highlight just like the time period in which this piece we're watching exists is like we like there's people right now storming school board meetings, yelling at the top of their lungs because they don't understand vaccines or masks or how they work. You have people that like somehow line the streets of Texas waiting for the reincarnation of JFK or JFK Jr. to fucking like take over and like spit in people's faces who mock them and like wave their Trump flags around. And he's gonna go all the way back to Sarah B. fucking Sanders for like an instance of like the liberals have gone too far.
She couldn't finish her pancakes though.
Like and it just tells me like what a fucking charlatan. Like it's clear to me like if that's notice like everything that we've seen so far, and I've watched a lot of Jonathan Haidt, he never mentions what the right wing does. It's always like, here's a little example of the liberals going too far. The liberals are doing stuff. Meanwhile, the fucking right wing people are doing crazy shit. Like legit dangerous crazy shit, and he's silent. The true enemy is that they wouldn't be doing that crazy shit if these people over here weren't asking them to stop being racist.
Yes. Yeah. It's so mind numbing, right? Like it feels like the thing that they're aiming for is just more of the same. Like they want to uphold the status quo in the worst way. And that involves being left alone when when they say awful things.
And then John Avalon slides into frame here and is like, "Hey, I want to teach the kids about extremism. Let's get this asshole on." Like, what a
Yeah.
fucking world we live in.
Ugh, so disappointing.
Yeah.
We have a culture war. And what we're getting into recently is every place all the time, 24/7 is the culture war. Even if you get on an airplane, the pilot can turn it into the culture war. So this is a very alarming
Like Southwest launches investigation into pilot reportedly using anti-Biden phrase on flight.
What kind of investigation does that take? You just like ask a guy? Just,
My guess is
like,
he probably said, "Let's go, Brandon," or something similar. It was
Yeah,
November
for
21,
sure.
21. So then they're like, well, is that saying fuck Joe Biden? Like, we're not sure. We need to investigate it. Because it wasn't the words fuck Joe Biden, but we get there was an intent. So that's my guess.
Yeah, was he frowning when he said it?
Yeah. Or did he do it with a pep?
Yeah, yeah.
Let's go,
It was
Brandon.
whimsical, so it's fine. Yeah.
development.
So what's the fix for that? to restore the right balance.
I like. What's the
What
fix
is he
for
gonna
that?
say here?
What's the fix for that? The fact that people got mad at a pilot saying, "Let's go, Brandon." What's the fix for that?
I hope he legitimately says what he's thinking, which is, let's do nothing.
Yeah.
Um, I wanted to say it. I don't think he's going to, though.
Well, first, I would say eliminate Facebook, Twitter, and various other platforms. And if we can't eliminate them, then for God's sakes, don't give them special, gigantic, amazing liability protection in Section 230 when they are not just bulletin boards. They are, with their algorithms, deciding what do we elevate and what do we suppress. They are publishers, and they should be treated as such, because it's not social media in general, like Zoom or texting, that is harmful. Those are good. This is a particular business model mastered by Facebook and Twitter, which I believe is incompatible with a liberal democracy, incompatible with a success in the United States in the coming years.
He's not wrong, but like, I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Where the fuck did that come from?
It just, I agree. Social media is bad. It is a right wing funnel, right? It's the Roblox to Ben Shapiro pipeline on YouTube, right? Like, that's bad. However, that's not what we were talking about today.
Well, not only that, we need to get back to a liberal democracy by putting in regulations that would stop the speech of corporations. Like, oh no! What is going on in his brain? Get it.
Just
Like, I'm the one who's for
Jonathan.
regulations, okay? I don't need to justify this to myself. I'm like, yeah, fuck Facebook. Let's regulate the shit out of him. But he's like, everyone needs to speak. How dare all these universities are being silenced by these kids that are run amok. And then all of a sudden he's like, you know what? Fuck Facebook, Twitter, destroy them. Regulate the hell out of them.
You had me to regulate,
I
destroy.
See, I think we're all on board with this last sentence that Haidt had, but I just don't know where it came from, especially like him bemoaning the illiberal left for so long. I assume that what he was talking about was, certain groups push to have more regulations and have, free speech curtailed, right? Like,
Like, even like to think in terms of him framing it as always the illiberal left is like, how is getting rid of Facebook and Twitter going to like reduce? Because like, I don't know many left-leaning people like me that use Facebook that often.
no,
Facebook is the right-wing boomer thing, you know?
It is a spot to keep track of who is now a disaster who went to your high school.
Yeah.
And like that is it. And you get to see them, post their anti-vax memes, and you go, oh no.
So it's like weird
And then
because
you close Facebook.
this is a solution to like, because the algorithms preference right-wing content. Like that's the problem with it. Like I agree, right? But it's like weird that that's a solution for the illiberal left. Unless he's coming around, maybe he's going, the reason why we have the illiberal left is because the right wing is so crazy. So we need to like, but he didn't express this in this interview. I don't. I don't.
No,
don't know.
just like straight Star Wars. There needs to be balance nonsense. I hate it so much.
It's all, you know what? It's all Star Wars. We need a balance in the Force. But if you come at me, these aren't the arguments you're looking for.
If you're balancing between tolerance and intolerance, all you're doing is like abetting intolerance, though. Like,
Hey now. It worked out great for the Jedi.
Yeah.
Oh right, no,
It worked
I
out so
forgot.
good for the Republic,
Yeah, nothing but good things.
Exactly.
Yeah, the Jedi's they're doing really great at like balancing the Force, which is why most of them are dead.
Yeah, it's
Hello, my rebels. Hello, my rebels. I'm a good boy. I'm a weirdo.